Who is an ideal boy? Professor Mehrotra, you must stop eating chips and Mr. Garg must stop using his mobile phone.
One more thing we can do is to stop doing these podcasts.
Why would a chief economic advisor say this in an economic survey about obesity, mobile addiction? Is all of this necessarily going to boost consumption and fix the economy? It seems that the chief economic advisor's advice to boost our economic growth is for all of us to become that Adarsh Balak.
Why should Vitt Mantri focus on these kind of things? Vitt Mantri or the finance minister should focus on the financial issues which we are facing.
That FDI is not coming in cannot just be blamed on India not being a favorable investment destination. You've got to look at other factors also.
In a world which is in turmoil, understandably, how is it that China is able to increase the exports but not India?
PMEAC में कोई आप समझते हैं कोई आवाज का उठाएगा? उठा ही नहीं सकता. हम आपके शो में ये सब बातें कर लेते हैं. There's not a hope in hell we are becoming Viksit Bharat at the current rate.
Hello and welcome. You're watching me, Sanket Upadhyay, on TheFederal. The show is called AI with Sanket. This is the AI of news because news in India today requires not artificial but analytical intelligence. The economic survey for this year, which is essentially a projection of which way the Indian economy will go for the next year, was presented in Parliament. The chief economic advisor spoke to the country about the various aspects of the economic survey. It mentioned a remarkable growth rate. It mentioned the reasons why the chief economic advisor feels that India is going to grow at that pace. It gave us a number of reasons. It gave us a number of statistics of the good things about the Indian economy, what is going right. But critics seem to be asking something else. Beyond the obvious, beyond the good statistics, is perhaps a reality which is hiding somewhere, an irritant which may prevent actual positive growth. What are those realities? Also, in the economic survey, a lot of economists now are questioning a correlation that was drawn by the chief economic advisor between your good habits, you're getting up early, you're eating healthy, you're not looking at your mobile phone, the risk of obesity, all this has been mentioned. What does this have to do with the Indian economy? Well, the chief economic advisor feels that yes, this has a lot to do with the economy. If you're addicted to the mobile phone, you're essentially building a society of brain rot individuals who will be less productive as we go along. But is that really the case? And is that really something which is stopping the Indian economy from really succeeding? Let's put all of this to a discussion. What do you think about the Economic Survey 2026? Alright, joining us right now on this broadcast is Subhash Garg, former Finance Secretary. Thank you very much, Mr. Garg, for joining us. It's always a pleasure to speak to you in all the platforms that we have spoken in the past, and we speak again now. I also have the privilege of hearing Professor Santosh Mehrotra, senior economist, who will try and decode what the economic survey. You see, we are going to speak about the economy. At the same time, we are also going to talk about how the economic survey looks at the Indian economy, its projections. Essentially, what is the economic survey? As the word says, the economic survey. So it's a survey of the economy of your country. How is the economy going to go about? What is the growth projection going to be? What are the challenges? It usually talks about those things. So, Mr. Garg, I want to begin with you first. The potential growth, according to the economic survey of 2026, is at 7.5%. where they feel that this boost is going to come from the manufacturing reforms, and land reforms are key to the acceleration. The earlier estimate was 6.5%. It also says the domestic economy is going to remain resilient. Would you concur to this assessment?
See, this assessment of potential growth is very dicey in my judgment. There are no great parameters. How do you assess the potential growth? But he has employed a certain kind of methodology and has come back that now India can expect to grow over a medium and long term at about 7% per annum, as against 6.5%, which was assessed at 5 years back. I don't think we should attach much importance to this concept of potential growth. What we should look at is what is the growth right now in this current year, and what is the projected growth for the next year. So you would have looked at the economic survey, which uses the National Statistical Organization's estimate of the growth for the current year at 7.4%, and the nominal growth of about 8%. So that is good growth going by the conventional standards, though our ambitions would require that we should grow at about 8 to 10% to deal with the poverty and the low income status of the country. But 7.5% in real terms is not a bad growth for the current year. What is trickier to my mind, and which the economic survey has not touched at all directly, it has only touched indirectly, is that when we compare our growth globally, in the global context, or when the Prime Minister sets out the task that we will become the third largest economy by 2029, or we'll become 5 trillion or 10 trillion kind of economy, we always mention that in the context of US dollar growth. So that is what we should also be looking at, that what is our US dollar growth for the current year. So in nominal terms, we grew at 8%. Dollar has appreciated, rupee has depreciated by 6.5%. So in dollar terms, actually we have grown only at 1.5%. It's a very big irony to say that at 7.4%, we are one of the largest growing or growth economy in the world. But at 1.5% dollar growth, we are at one of the lowest or the least growing country in the world. That irony, I was thinking that the CEA would explain in the economic survey, but he doesn't touch. He in fact makes, to my mind, a wrong kind of call, that rupee, despite its fundamentals, is suffering because of the global factors, and he dismisses it by simply calling it a wrinkle in the ointment kind of expression which is used. I think it shouldn't be avoided. The dollar depreciation, rupee depreciation vis-a-vis dollar is a very serious situation, especially in view of the fact that while dollar is depreciating against all the currencies in the world, rupee is depreciating against a depreciating dollar. That is a phenomenon which is bizarre, so to say, which should be very seriously taken.
I'll have to ask you to elaborate on each of these points, particularly the point of the tumbling rupee, in just a short moment from now. Professor Mehrotra, your quick opening comments before we, invite other or go into specific aspects.
Right. Well, his projections about growth, they are not terribly impressive, because there are all series of questions about the growth rate itself. I don't think we have the time to go into that, but I won't go there. If you want, later on, I can come back to this subject. There's a bit of good news that, I see Dr. Nageswaran finally coming out of his rather straight-jacketed financial economist's hat, which is what he's worn for most of the time that he's been CEA. And I think it's our tragedy that we have not had macroeconomists as chief economic advisors. We've had financial economists, this one as well as the previous one. This is for the first time that I'm beginning to see some sense of an understanding of what a broad-based industrial policy might look like. The industry chapter, I was very relieved to see that he actually talks about the need for broad-basing our manufacturing, point one, and point two, the need for focus using a cluster development strategy. Why did I pick that up? Sanket, I picked that up because it's not fully appreciated in our country by economists that late industrialized, like Italy among the rich countries, and really successful ones like China, had very successfully over a 2-decade period, particularly China, used a cluster development strategy. And thankfully, instead of developing new clusters, he talks about investing in brownfield sites. Sanket, it's not very well known, my friend, that there are 5,500 clusters in our country. If we were only to make the appropriate set of 4 types of investments there, we can talk about that later. Manufacturing would revive, point one. These clusters would revive, MSME would revive, and jobs would revive. That's what we desperately need. And let me just finish by saying that I don't see much of a recognition of the following fact, that there is tepid aggregate demand in the entire economy. Had there not been tepid aggregate demand for over 10 or 12 years, we wouldn't see a situation where investment to GDP ratio has been in the region of 28 and 31% for the last 10 or 11 years. So if growth is slower in the last 10 or 11 compared to the preceding 10 years, and I have to say I was in government in the Planning Commission in those days, it is because the investment rate then was much higher, and because investment rate was higher, jobs were growing, and if jobs were growing, they were also really leading to real wage increases. Today, you don't have private investment, you don't have non-farm jobs growing at the rate that we need to, and real wages growing. So none of those 3 conditions apply. So this optimism about future growth, quite apart from the fact that there are serious question marks about the estimate itself, and it's not just Arvind Subramaniam, many of us, Professor Arun Kumar, myself, we've been raising questions about that, remain in any case. Back to you, Sanket.
Mr. Subhash Garg, you see, among the things that the chief economic advisor mentioned on why he is so upbeat about a very positive growth percentage for India, which you, to quote you only, call dicey. You feel that these growth projections are a little dicey. A few things that he mentioned was about the improvement in the education and social indicators. He mentioned, if I quickly go through this table, he mentioned how trade is no longer reciprocal in nature. At the same time, you've got a Trump breathing down your neck and us making, some concessions to accommodate him. He talks about growth momentum being intact in India, sustained growth momentum, macro growth figures are being given as a position of strength, public finance and banking on how NPAs have fallen, central revenue receipts are rising. All these are the points that are being given to position why this growth projection shall be what it will be in its estimate. But Mr. Garg, the buzzwords, if I were to note from Mr. Nageswaran, the CEA's speech, is that there should be more FDI, and the buzzword this time around is swadeshi. Do you feel that these few factors alone can continue our growth projection? Or there are some serious gaping holes that need to be addressed? Otherwise, it's wishful thinking. I can think the moon about myself.
So, see, India is a large, big economy, and at any point of time, there will be a lot of good things happening, but at the same time, a lot of bad things also happening. So, what you initially quoted, the growth in the banking sector, reduction of NPAs, many of these factors are doing well. There's no denying it. There's no point in denying them. Even the headline growth rate of 7.5% is not bad. But at the same time, again, what you just picked up from the survey, the FDI is not coming, the FPIs are pulling out, the rupee is depreciating, many of the new industry entrepreneurs are leaving. You would have seen only about a few days back, there was a news that more than 100 AI entrepreneurs have relocated to Silicon Valley. So so what the sense we should be making is that despite a lot of good things happening, and at the same time a lot of bad things happening, how is uh, how is it likely to span out in future? Uh, the economic survey did not really talk about the path forward, except saying that swadeshi, since uh, there is a sort of distaste or not very happiness about questioning the concept of swadeshi or atmanirbharta in the country, uh, at least in the official circles, he has tried to make a new definition of swadeshi. So, to probably satisfy both sides that we are still talking about swadeshi, whereas actually we are trying to do something different, right? And he has given a three-way path forward, which is couched in the language which is very difficult for most people to understand. The inevitability is make India indispensable, as if you are today dispensable and tomorrow you can become indispensable. The growth, resilience, Swadeshi. So I think there is a lot of confusion in the economic survey about. My own take, let us say, I would take it very seriously that if the FDI is not coming to the country, and FPIs are sort of moving out of the country, that indicates that the external economy, at least, does not have tremendous confidence about India's ability to grow. Otherwise, why would they not come to invest? Why would the FDI not come? And if the growth
But
would
Mr.
bring,
Garg, whenever this question has been asked of the government, I'm just playing devil's advocate here. They say that there are various other international factors. The fact that FDI is not coming in cannot just be blamed on India not being a favorable investment destination. You've got to look at other factors also. Look at how Trump is behaving in the United States and how inward looking generally the world has become. So the things will turn. We will soon have a favorable situation. FDIs will eventually come, but consider this a temporary phenomenon. How would you respond? And then Professor Mehrotra on the same point.
it's a fair point in a way, but look at, so Trump has upturned the global economic order, no doubt about that, by using his export tariffs and import tariffs and other kinds of things. But look at one number. The data for released in December said that for 2025, Chinese export surplus has actually gone up from $900 billion to $1.2 billion. So it's the same world in which China
Trillion,
is exporting.
trillion. Garg sahab,
1.2, yes,
trillion.
absolutely. 1.2 trillion.
हमें वो आपने बिलियन कह दिया था इसलिए.
No, 900 billion to 1.2 trillion. Right. So, whereas India's exports are suffering. So, in a world which is in turmoil, understandably, how is it that China is able to increase the exports but not India. China's manufacturing, which is, today it's a factory of the world, China's manufacturing has not suffered despite all these things. Why? We know it's not very difficult to understand. See, the investment is made in the future economy of the world or future goods. And what are the future goods? Look at the solar energy transition, look at the computerization, look at the digital kind of thing, electrical vehicles and all. That is where all the technologies and production systems is with China, not with India. We don't have. So why would the world invest here instead of investing somewhere else? These are hard questions which should be asked. Let's not simply hope that tomorrow the world people might come back to us, the investment cycle might turn. They will not turn unless you have a proposition to offer.
Correct. Professor Mehrotra, you wanted to weigh in.
Yeah. See, in addition to the points that Mr. Garg has been making, I want to remind your viewers of 2 points that I had made, which can never be lost sight of, and I don't think the economic survey takes sufficient cognizance of either of those 2 points. And one is that private investment has not revived. If domestic, national, private investment is not reviving, and it hasn't, corporate profits have been pretty robust over the last 7 or 8 years since slightly before COVID. After COVID as well, they've been very robust, but the corporates are not investing. Private corporate investment has been of the order of 12% for the last 10 or 12 years. So why would you expect FDI to flood in when your own private corporates are not investing, and neither are investing because there's a there's a stagnation in aggregate demand. Had there not been a stagnation in aggregate demand, this investment would have flown in. We've had a situation where you've had capacity utilization in manufacturing of the order of 74-75%. फिर भी नहीं कोई इन्वेस्ट कर रहा है. क्यों नहीं कर रहा है भाई? और पैसा विदेश ले जा रहे. लेजिटिमेट सवाल है ना. और इन सवालों का जवाब कोई नहीं देता. I wish the answers were there in the economic survey. You see that I'll tell you what the bottom line is. I'm going to take my gloves off here, Sanket. We've been listening far too much to this kind of sarkari narrative. The problem is there are not enough economists in the government who have to be willing to tell the truth. And there aren't any. Even the RBI, which has really a good solid concentration of economists, the only place where there is a good solid concentration of economists in the RBI, I have young friends, my students who are working there and who tell me, एक sentence भी critique का, I mean, kids, my PhD students who've gone are working there, and they cannot write a sentence which is critical in a public paper. So they have stopped writing with me. अब आप समझ लीजिए, ये तो स्थिति है RBI की. तो PMEAC में कोई आप समझते हैं कोई आवाज का उठाएगा, या मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ फाइनेंस में कोई आवाज उठा ही नहीं सकता. ये तो गर्ग साहब और हम आपके शो में ये सब बातें कर लेते हैं. I'm speaking the truth. I mean, there's enough of this listening. I had to take my gloves off.
I know, I appreciate you for doing this. You never had the gloves on, I would say. They were always off. But, speaking of not critiquing anything related to the economy, Mr. Garg as well as Professor Mehrotra, one by one, there is one place where the economic survey and the chief economic advisor did criticize, and he linked it directly to the economy. Now I want to know your views. Let's quickly put that presentation on screen. He says that obesity and ultra processed food is a huge challenge. Now, challenge for health, and because of the challenge to health, a challenge to the economy. Then the chief economic advisor also tells us about the big economic risk of digital addiction. You see, the comparison that has been made in the economic survey 25-26 is that this digital obsession, this real culture, this real phenomenon is creating brain rot, brain dead individuals who will be confused, and in their productive years they will be useless, and thus that will be a big risk to the economy. Mr. Garg, you seem to be smiling away through this assessment of the economic survey, but what are your views? Don't you think obesity and mobile addiction are a danger to India's economy?
See, this is amusing, honestly, and diversionary to my mind. Chief economic advisor getting into those issues and not really bringing any connection with the economic growth of that. I'm not recommending it, I'm not endorsing it, but consumption of any type, whether it is digital addiction or it is the fast food and things like that, ends up actually adding to the economic growth. So an economist, chief economist, talking about this is talking about from the social point of view or social consequence of it, not the economic consequence. And therefore I was really amused to see that he has chosen to bring this up. Is he trying to suggest that if we deal with these issues and reduce this demand, like we have reduced the demand for the gaming, again I'm not recommending gaming, but if we have reduced the demand for gaming, if we reduce the demand for the fast food, if we reduce the demand for the social media and the consumption, the economy will grow. That is a conclusion which is completely ununderstandable. So I would suggest that the chief economic advisor leaves the subject to the health guys, the psychologist guys and all, and focus his attention.
Or Mr. Garg, perhaps give us, with the help of an economic survey, a sound scientific peer-reviewed study that shows a direct relation between these subjects and its impact vis-a-vis Indian economy.
You see, there are so many forums for dealing with these issues. You can deal it with the Rashtrapati ji's bhashan to the Lok Sabha. Why should Vitt Mantri focus on these kind of things? Vitt Mantri or the finance minister should focus on the financial issues which we are facing. The expenditure, the tax and the deficits and those kind of things. These issues are too sort of peripheral as far as I am concerned. You would recall many years back, there used to be a fascination in this country about the anti-bhoj kind of culture, that marriages, death, if we organize sort of dinners or lunches or bhoj for the people, that is bad for the country. Right? And that economically was not bad for the country. That was actually growing consumption. But we used to think that these are economic solutions if we ban the organization of these kind of big bhoj and other things. This is the same kind of thing. I don't think we should waste time on issues like this.
Professor Mehrotra, you see, I was reminded when I was watching his speech and also the newspaper articles today of that classic poster that we were given as kids by our parents. Who is an ideal boy? Ideal boy is who wakes up at 6 a.m., brushes his teeth, goes to school, keeps nails clean, studies, respects parents, goes off to sleep on time. It seems that the chief economic advisor's advice to the country to boost our economic growth is for all of us to become that Adarsh Balak. Eat healthy. I mean, these are very good suggestions. Extremely good suggestions. I will try to implement them myself. I'm going to shun that burger. I will move away from that mobile phone. If there is a guarantee that tomorrow the rupee is going to emerge stronger, if tomorrow our economy is going to soar ahead? What is your assessment, Professor Mehrotra?
Sanket, I'd take you back to your own remark that I would have liked him to draw the connection between this obesity on the one hand and rising cardiovascular disease to the economy. Now, I would draw that connection for you, which he didn't, unfortunately. And that is as follows. Who do you think is afflicted with this problem of obesity? It is the top 15% max of the total population. It's not the bottom 85% of the population which is afflicted with obesity. They are not the ones who have the purchasing power necessarily to eat chips the whole day or popcorn the whole day. The fact of the matter is the vast majority of them, of the 85%, spend plenty of time burning calories, so that they don't become obese. So the way I would have connected it is, I would say that the obesity is a reflection, and the growing obesity is a reflection of the growing inequality in our economy. Does he talk about it? I don't see much mention of growing inequality in the economy, and I can give you plenty of evidence about the growing inequality. There's plenty of studies about that. So he doesn't. If you look at the class structure of the obesity phenomenon versus the malnutrition phenomenon, it would be plenty clear. It should be pretty self-evident. And he could have done that. I wish he did.
Mr. Garg, why would a chief economic advisor say this in an economic survey about obesity, mobile addiction? I realize that these are big, complex social problems. I do feel it's a health related risk in this country. It is a lifestyle related risk. We are not building good individuals by eating unhealthy and watching too many reels, frankly wasting time. It's relation directly to the economy, and that being the one big reason which will ensure India being held back, or if it is rectified, India's economy will suddenly get better. Do you think this relation was perhaps unclear?
See, the issue is much deeper. The issue is that we have 145 crore people, but we don't have work for them. They face enormous amount of joblessness or underemployment. Similarly, we have an education system where they don't get the quality education and skills to become employable. So there is so much time available with so many millions of young children and persons. At the same time, the mobile smartphones have become so cheap, literally, that it's affordable by anyone. So it has become universal. And since we have data pricing, again, I'm not suggesting we should price data higher, but it's a fact that the data price in the country is one of the lowest in the world. So it creates a very ideal situation for the social media and the other kind of companies to sort of put out so much into their phones, which they can consume to kill their time or to enjoy themselves in whatever situation they are. Now, this is the deeper side of the problem. Can we get the young engaged into more productive, more wholesome, entertaining kind of education, skills, work situation? That is where the solution lies. But there is no sort of visibility of those solutions.
So you feel the economic survey should have ought to offer these solutions or suggestions and not just highlight the problems. And what the Professor Mehrotra, what the economic survey did was tell us what everybody already knows. We know we are not supposed to eat chips. We know watching too much mobile is wrong. So they just stated the obvious. But Professor Mehrotra, I just want to know, do you feel Mr. Nageswaran has just checked all the boxes? He has in the past said that your big companies, they have got a relief in their corporate tax, but they are not plowing that money enough and not generating enough employment. However, their profits are increasing, which you also mentioned. This is the CEA's comment in the past. The CEA also says that social media is bad. Do not watch TV. You must exercise. He's listed a whole lot of behavioral exercises. I know I need to exercise. I do also. But the point is all of this necessarily going to boost consumption and fix the economy? That is the crucial part.
No, of course it is not. Sanket, in fact, you asked the most important question and you articulated in a very sharp way, because our problem is precisely the following: that the economy's so-called fast growth rate is being sustained by consumption of the top 10 to 15% of the population. Which economy in the world which would like to sustain growth at the rate that Garg Sahab rightly pointed out? I estimate in my forthcoming book, India Out of Work, that we need 9% growth on average for the next 8 to 10 years. Thereafter, 8% growth for the next 10 years, and then we can be comfortable with 7%. But we are comfortable today with 7%. There's not a hope in hell we are becoming Viksit Bharat at the current rate. And let me just remind our viewers that for the 2030s, none of the major international organizations like OECD, World Bank, IMF have so far been projecting on average till 2030 a growth rate more than 6.5%. Now look at the gap here. The gap that we need to achieve, because we are a relatively low income country just now, we have to grow at 9 now, because we will not be able to grow at 9 8-10 years down the road. We would have utilized more of the available labor and capital, and so the growth rate will inevitably slow as China's growth rate is slowed. So we have to make the best. Now, one final reason why that's essential: we are running out of our demographic dividend. We are the only major economy other than Indonesia which still has its demographic dividend. But both Indonesia and we are going to run out of it by 2040. 15 years, we will be an aging society. That means this window of opportunity, which has been around for 40 years till now, we haven't utilized in the way that we could have or should have. We now have only 15 years left. Can you imagine a situation, Sanket, where, and the economic survey doesn't recognize this problem, that the dividend is ending in 15 years. We're still living in this cloud cuckoo land. Oh, we are a young society, we are a young population, 2/3 of our population is below 35. Rubbish. Do you know what the actual numbers are? Half of our workforce is over 45. That means in 15 years, they'll be over 60. Half. And this share is rapidly rising. Who's mentioning these numbers? I mean, no one is mentioning these numbers. Can you imagine a crisis 15 years down the road? We have, on the one hand, high and rising share of aging. On the other hand, young who are looking for jobs, not finding them. This will be a double whammy that this economy will be incapable of coping with.
I think the CEA has one simple solution for all of these problems. Professor Mehrotra, you must stop eating chips, and Mr. Garg must stop using his mobile phone. Things will improve. Thank you so much.
One more thing I
yes,
can do is to stop doing these podcasts. That will keep a lot of people unaware of what the reality is.
That's the point.
So,
Well said. Well said. Anyway,
that-
wish you good health as the CEA is advising. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us. Thank you so much for decoding the
all the
economic
best.
survey. Thank you.
Bye-bye.